Almost 60 years ago, when I was 15 years old, I made it my mission to read banned books, each bought with my hard-earned babysitting money. One of those books was Catcher in the Rye, and I had to buy it twice, because the first one was confiscated. The second time I was caught reading this book, a much-admired youth minister came to my house and counseled me in my bedroom. He said that dirty books would give me a dirty mind, and to prove his point, he sexually assaulted me. Afterward, he said no one would believe anything I said because of the books I read. He prayed for God to forgive me. That day, I left my room a different girl. I rejected my Christian upbringing and started to ask my own questions about good and evil, lies and truth, kindness and hypocrisy. That unwanted life lesson was one of the reasons I became a writer. These days, I find it ironic that the Joy Luck Club is on the banned books list in some school districts for being sexually explicit and not in keeping with the values of American culture. I'm puzzled by the description, but I like to think it has driven some students to deliberately read my book. I'm always thrilled when students write to me telling me that they have protested this ban through a letter writing campaign, for example. And I congratulate them on making their own choice to not have their young minds blinkered by small-mindedness. How could anyone think my writing is dangerous? My stories cover the themes of hope and grief and love and betrayal and identity and self-reconciliation. They concern human nature. They are influenced by personal family history that includes trauma, suicide, secrets, and lies, betrayals. My sources are visceral memories of what I experienced as a child. All of that created my literary DNA, expressed in the kinds of stories I write, compelled by a need to understand who I am and what I believe and why that came to be so. My intent is always personal, and I have not been consciously guided by the expectations and interpretation of others. I have also not written for altruistic reasons, to break down barriers or build bridges and such, so I've never thought of myself as political writer. Not the way George Orwell describes that role, a writer whose purpose is to move the reader toward a particular view. But on reflection, I realize that books, by their nature, have far-reaching consequences, regardless of our conscious intentions. And that is because books have readers. Readers have reactions. And what they do with those reactions is of consequence. And thus what I write has consequences, personal and political. A 15-year-old girl might read a banned book and become a writer as a consequence. I am that girl, that writer, an American who uses her freedom of expression, an American by birthright, born on American soil to parents whose student visas had expired and whose backgrounds would have led to persecution in a new China under communist rule. I read the threatening deportation letters, and I now understand what they must have felt, because my birthright, along with that of millions of others, is now being argued before the Supreme Court. No matter the outcome, it is a kick in the gut knowing that there are people in the highest echelons of government who already think we birthright Americans don't belong. There are millions of Americans who support that view. And Trump has already suggested that if we protest, we could be seen as insurrectionists, undeserving of citizenship. In this new dystopian society, my freedom of speech does not mean I will always be free of persecution. As I said, I've never thought of myself as a political writer. I write about the lives of imaginary characters, people who do not really exist. But by necessity of my craft, I have sympathy for my characters. I am an empathic witness to their made-up traumas. I practice compassion whenever I write. compassion for the women in my family who suffered and inspired my stories. I have compassion for the readers who say, I have written a story about them. Who we have compassion for today, in our writing, in public discourse, and in action, reflects our politics, our assumptions about justice, our beliefs about equality, and who belongs. I have always known this at some level. I have always been a subversively political writer by virtue of my compassion. Compassion is political. It is the opposite of a blinkered mind. I thank all my fellow writers for their politics, their compassion, and their stories, in their public speech, and in their actions. I am grateful for their stories that deepen our understanding of humanity. We need you to write more and more and more, and not with AI. We need readers to read more and more of them. That is what gives us hope. Thank you very much.